What's up, everybody? Today I'll show you a disc brake conversion that I've been doing on this little two-wheel drive Blazer right here to my left. Good customer. He brought it in a few months ago. He's been building it for probably the past year and a half, I guess. And he brought it in for me to do a 2.5-inch polished stainless exhaust. And while it was here, we went ahead and ordered him a set of Wilwood brakes for it. We did the 6-piston calipers in the front with a 14-inch rotor, and then a 4-piston caliper in the back with a 13-inch rotor. Did the red calipers with the black rotors. Went ahead and ordered the Wilwood Pro Spindle. I believe it's a 2.5-inch drop spindle. I'm gonna turn this thing around, let y'all see a couple of details on it. As you can see, I've already got the brake kit installed, front and rear. I'll start with the front kit. So as you can see, we've got the Pro Spindle with the 14-inch rotors and the 6-piston calipers. Big difference is a factory setup. This has actually already had a 2-inch drop spindle. I'm assuming it's like a CPP spindle. But basically it uses a single piston caliper. The caliper bracket is already made onto the spindle, so it just bolts on. And then it just takes inner and outer bearing, just like a standard, any pretty much standard GM setup. But I believe it probably has I'm gonna say an 11-inch rotor, whatever factory is for a C10 or C10 Blazer. Come around here, you can see on the Wilwoods, big difference with them is they have a 2-piece rotor. So you have the main part right here that goes actually over the hub, and we call this the hat. And then this outer rotor actually bolts to it. It uses 12-point bolts that are all drilled for safety wire, so you can actually see through the rotor itself where I've safety wired all the bolts. The caliper bracket is separate from the spindle on these so that you can actually shim them, and shimming them will actually allow you to get the caliper to be perfectly centered on the rotor. And then the caliper itself is also shimmable off the caliper bracket, and that way that you can get the pads the correct depth over the rotor itself. So it still takes, it's got a billet hub, all screw-in studs. It still has an inner and outer bearing and a normal dust cover, but really just a super nice setup. Basically with this Wilwood kit, you can see that it has a nice stainless brake line, ties right back into our factory setup, and they supply their own little bulkhead deal here. So now on to the back. So like all C10s or Blazers, this one, it had factory rear drum brakes. Basically this is just a backing plate that bolts to the flange on the axle. You have a wheel cylinder, so as you apply pressure to the brakes, the wheel cylinder pushes the front and rear shoes out and actually puts pressure onto the drum itself, and that's what makes your brakes work. Also with these, you have a parking brake cable that would actually pull the shoes out when you put the parking brake on. So on these, they basically have a small drum assembly that actually bolts to the axle tube. And then just like the fronts, you have a 2-piece rotor. The hat, however, basically acts as the drum. So you have 2 shoes inside that, as you pull the parking brake cables, they expand and they will actually touch the inside of this drum. And then just like the front, also the caliper brackets, they are shimmable. Same way, you can shim them left to right and then have the caliper actually extend or you can shim it front to rear to get the depth of the pads on the rotor. So real nice setup. You know, a few hours front and rear, everything goes together pretty smooth. The only big thing on the axle, on the rear side, you do have to pull the axles. Like everything, most other GM stuff, this is a C-clip axle. So basically you pull the rear cover off, pull the C-clips out, pull the axles out, and that allows you to take the backing plates and the drums off. And then that way you can mount the parking brake assembly that bolts to the axle flange, and then slip the axles back in, put C-clips back on it, and put the cover back together. And then that's when you can actually start mocking all this up, getting all your clearances right for the pads and the rotor, and you'll be pretty much good to go. So next thing I'm gonna do is get the new parking brake cables on, get the parking brake adjusted, and then pretty much bleed the brakes. You just go in a normal furthest start, basically at the furthest wheel, work your way to the front, and hopefully that'll all be done. This one already had a Wilwood master cylinder on it, so it should be pretty easy. And then only other thing is with the Wilwoods, like these rear calipers, they have 4 bleeders. You always want to, you know, use the top bleeders, and that's just because if you use the bottom ones, it will bring air into the system, and that is what you were trying to get rid of. I also want to take some time to show the 2.5-inch polished stainless exhaust I built forward a few months ago. You can see it actually comes out the muffler with V-bands, and the tailpipes actually come outside the frame rail. And it's got a nice hanger right there, and then they actually tuck down below and just hid behind the quarters. This one, see if I can get a little bit of video on this. You can't really see, but it comes through this main cross member right here, and you can see it dipping down out of the header, and I actually tucked it up in the frame. So pretty much below the vehicle, you see none of the exhaust until it gets outside the frame rail at the back. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. If you got any questions on the Blazer here or any of the Wilwood brake stuff, just give me a shout. Thanks.